I wasn't supposed to hear it. That's the part that still makes my stomach twist. How a single slip of his finger kept the line open. How a sentence meant for someone else poured straight into my ears. My boss had just wrapped up our late-night call, the kind where your headset feels welded to your skull and your coffee's been cold for hours. He said, "He's too blind to see it," and then paused. I thought he was talking to me, but no. A chair scraped, another voice came into the room, and then he laughed. "She's diligent, not dangerous, useful, but invisible." And the worst part? He was talking about me. I sat there, mouse hovering over the leave meeting button, frozen. My pulse thudded like static in the earpiece. He hadn't hung up. Every word spilled out, raw, unfiltered. He bragged about stealing my slide drafts, joked about how I double-check numbers so he doesn't have to, and then laughed about how the CFO never notices when he inflates adoption metrics. All she does is scrub dashboards. By the time she notices, it's already mine. I should have hung up. I should have spared myself. But I couldn't. Not when he mentioned my mentor, an older analyst who taught me everything about the systems here. He's next. Too old. Too stubborn. We'll paper him with a performance plan. Push him out. She'll never fight it. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. I opened my eyes, forced myself to breathe, and clicked the record flag on the call. Company policy automatically logs meetings anyway, but now there was a copy in my private archive. Timestamps, raw audio. His voice clear as glass. He talked for almost 10 minutes about how the board wanted a shiny pilot success and how he'd massage the data, about how I'd keep cleaning the numbers while he pitched upstairs, about how my work ethic made me the perfect cover. He called it polishing his crown. I sat in that fluorescent-lit office, the kind where the vents hum louder than your thoughts, staring at my reflection in the dark monitor. I wasn't angry, not at first. I was cold. Cold in a way that sharpens you, that carves out all the noise and leaves just clarity. I knew two things. One, if I confronted him tomorrow, he'd laugh, spin it back on me, maybe fire me. Two, if I stayed quiet, I had time. So I made a choice. I started a clock in my head. 30 days, 1 month to build a file he couldn't wriggle out of. 1 month to let him believe I was invisible, while I traced every footprint he left in the system. The call finally clicked off when he shut his laptop. My ears rang in the silence. I sat there a long time, staring at the empty calendar for next week, and I whispered, "You have no idea what you just did." And maybe you're wondering why I'm even telling this, because this isn't just office drama. This is about how people show you who they really are when they think no one's listening. My boss didn't just insult me. He told me his whole playbook. If you've ever caught someone's hot mic truth, you know what I mean. Stick with me. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens a month later, when the same arrogance that makes someone careless becomes the exact rope they hang themselves with. If you're here for Karma Served Cold, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever overheard something you weren't supposed to? Because that's where everything starts. The next morning, everything looked normal. Office chatter, pings on Slack, a new sprint ticket waiting for me. But normal felt different now. Every glance at his messages, every "good work, keep polishing," carried an echo of what I'd heard. He thought I was invisible. That was his blind spot, and I was going to use it. First step, map the players. Our team wasn't big, but the dynamics mattered. There was my mentor, Dan, a quiet senior analyst in his 50s, who had built half our pipelines back when the company was still renting shared office space. There was Sophie from finance, who checked numbers but never dug too deep. She was overloaded. A compliance intern named Michael barely noticed, drowning in policy PDFs. And of course the clients, mid-tier but important, looking for proof our product could scale. Then there was him, my boss. Charismatic when he wanted, sharp suit, too much cologne, the kind of guy who thought owning the room meant talking louder than anyone else. He'd never coded a query in his life, but he knew how to steal one. I didn't need to invent anything. All I had to do was trace what was already happening. So I started small. Every time I shipped a query or dashboard, I exported a copy with version history. If I posted something in Slack, I screenshotted his copy-paste act when he forwarded my words to leadership. I didn't accuse. I didn't even roll my eyes. I just saved it, folder by folder, timestamp by timestamp. And patterns emerged fast. My naming conventions, little quirks like temp calc x or pivots chasya zs, started showing up in his decks, slides he claimed to have written himself. He reused them without even renaming. He'd cut off my headers but forget the metadata in the CSV exports. He thought numbers were decoration. I knew they were fingerprints. Meanwhile, he was moving quicker. Pilot adoption was his obsession. He kept promising the CFO that usage was up, retention was strong, and clients were thrilled. But when I checked the logs, I saw midnight spikes from clustered IPs, traffic that didn't match real humans, scripted, fake. He thought no one would bother cross-checking. That's when I built my insurance. 3 little traps. I called them beacons. Beacon 1, I locked one critical metric behind a query that only pulled from live production data. No test traffic, no scripts. If someone tried to fake it from a sandbox, it would return null. Beacon 2, I left a watermark inside a SQL view, just a comment line with my initials and date. Invisible in the chart, but unmissable in the lineage tool the board used for audits. Beacon 3, I created a harmless decoy chart, looked normal, but if anyone changed the denominator to active users to boost percentages, the formula collapsed into obvious nonsense. A time bomb disguised as a pie chart. I didn't tell anyone, not even Dan. He was already under pressure, called into closed-door meetings about performance. I saw the PIP template in his inbox when he asked me to double-check a metric. The numbers they wanted him to hit weren't possible, not with real data. It made me sick, watching him pack his lunch in the break room like everything was fine, knowing he could be forced out any day. But I couldn't warn him, not yet. If I tipped my hand too early, my boss would bury us both. Instead, I kept laying tracks. I filed doc receipts. I flagged deliverables in Jira with exact timestamps. I shared queries in group channels so the footprint was public, then watched as my boss stripped my name when he pitched them upstairs. And then, just like he'd bragged, he scheduled the big pre-read for the board, sent out invites, listed himself as sole presenter. My name wasn't anywhere. Neither was Dan's. I stared at that invite on my screen, heart hammering, and felt the clock in my head tick louder. 23 days left. 23 days to let him tighten the noose with his own hands. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to myself, and soon not to anyone else. The pressure didn't come all at once. It dripped, steady, corrosive, the way a pipe leaks behind the wall until the paint starts to bubble. He started by cutting me out of meetings. A Monday invite to a client sync, canceled to save my time. A Thursday strategy call, not relevant to execution. But within hours, my phone buzzed with a DM. Need a quick draft response on this. Attached was a question from the client about retention metrics. I wrote out a careful answer, sample size, methodology, caveats. 10 minutes later, I saw the exact text pasted by him onto the group chat, word for word as if he'd typed it himself. I wanted to scream. Instead, I screenshot it, saved it, and replied, in our private thread. It kept happening. Questions about adoption funnels, about which segments churned fastest, about which A/B tests actually mattered, always rerouted through me, then laundered through him. He called it team efficiency. I called it theft with better formatting. Meanwhile, Dan, my mentor, was slipping under the weight. HR handed him a performance plan so absurd it read like satire. Reduce error rate to 0. Cut query times in half. Deliver strategic foresight to leadership. I watched him read the document in the break room, lips pressed tight, eyes hollow. That night, he quietly cleared out a couple of personal photos from his desk. Not all, just some. The kind of move a man makes when he doesn't know if he'll still have a desk next week. It burned in my chest, but I didn't intervene. Not yet. Every injustice was another thread tightening around my boss's wrists. I just had to hold the line. The cracks in his facade showed first with the pilot. The traffic pattern was wrong. Bursts of logins at 2 a.m. from IPs clustered like a bot farm. Real users don't move like that. I logged everything, addresses, timestamps, even the sequence of clicks that repeated like clockwork. To the board, it looked like adoption. To me, it looked like desperation. Michael, the compliance intern, noticed too. He stopped me in the hallway, clutching a printout. Hey, this denominator looks weird. Am I missing something? His voice wavered, but his instincts were sharp. I glanced at the page. It was one of the doctored charts. The denominator had been swapped to inflate percentages. My decoy beacon, I kept my face neutral. Check the policy on data lineage, I told him. See what it says about reproducibility. He nodded, confused, but I could see the spark in his eyes. He'd dig. I didn't need to push. Days blurred into nights, and I worked like a ghost, present but unseen. I kept my own notebooks, my own drive, my own chain of custody. Every slide he lifted from me, every number he warped, I stored with the unedited original. But he didn't slow down. He wanted more, faster. The CFO needs a narrative, he said one morning, pacing the war room. We don't sell data. We sell confidence. Make the numbers tell a story. His tone was smooth, almost charming. To anyone else, he looked like a leader rallying his team. To me, he looked like a man sawing through the branch he was standing on. Then came the day he bragged about Dan's supposed failings in front of the team. Some people just can't keep up, he said, grinning. Dead weight. Dan kept his eyes on the table, silent. I wanted to punch something. Instead, I wrote down the timestamp, the room number, the names of who was present, receipts. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing his laugh replay in my head. Diligent, not dangerous, useful, invisible. So I booked a quiet one-to-one, not with him, with the CFO's chief of staff. I didn't go in guns blazing. I played it subtle. I've been working on data lineage, wanted to make sure we're in compliance before the board review. A harmless technical question on the surface, but it planted something, a reminder that governance existed, that not all numbers were equal. The chief of staff smiled politely, said they appreciated the diligence, but I saw the note they scribbled. I walked out of that office with my heart pounding. It was small, almost nothing, but it was a seed. By then, the clock in my head read 12 days. 12 days until the board review. 12 days until every beacon, every log, every slip of his arrogance converged. And when it did, I wouldn't be invisible anymore. The days ticked down like a metronome. Every morning I woke up with the same thought. Don't rush it. Don't flinch. The board pre-read was circled on the calendar in bright red, and my boss strutted around like a man who'd already won. He'd started practicing his lines in open spaces, rehearsing the way he'd pause for applause, the way he'd point at charts that weren't even his. The adoption curve speaks for itself, he said one afternoon, gesturing at a graph I'd built. We didn't just grow, we surged. He loved that word, surged. But when he clicked to the live dataset, the system stuttered. Blank cells, error flags. He waved it off with a chuckle. Sandbox glitch, we'll polish later. Inside, my pulse hammered. That wasn't a glitch. That was Beacon 1, the locked metric. Without real production data, the kind his fake traffic couldn't generate, the chart would stay empty, and the board always asked for a live refresh, but he didn't notice. He never did. A day later, I saw him export a query into his slide deck. I caught the header flash for just a second. There it was, my watermark, Beacon 2, a line of SQL comment text buried in the lineage, my initials and a date, invisible unless you pulled it into the governance tool, which the board always did. And then, at the rehearsal, it happened. He tried to boost percentages by swapping the denominator to active users. On the big screen in front of senior managers, the decoy chart collapsed. Numbers spiraled into nonsense, percentages over 300%, labels overlapping like a drunk Excel sheet. He froze, laughed too loudly, and skipped the slide. Everyone chuckled politely. Nobody else knew what they were looking at, but I did. Beacon 3 had fired. That night I sat alone at my desk, staring at the folder on my encrypted drive. 37 files, 37 receipts, screenshots, exports, chat logs, timestamps, proof of every theft, every lie, every manipulation. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I could have sent it all then, to HR, to legal, to anyone. But that wasn't the moment. Not yet, because someone else had noticed. Michael, the intern, stopped me again, clutching a different report. His voice was steadier this time. I don't think these traffic logs are real. They're all at 2 in the morning. Same 3 IP ranges. His eyes searched mine. That's fraud, isn't it? I nodded once, slow. Check the compliance handbook, page 47. Client usage verification. He didn't press. But the next morning, legal scheduled a routine validation of adoption metrics on the same day as the board pre-read at the same hour. Coincidence? Maybe. But I knew better. Michael had connected the dots, and now the board would too. Meanwhile, Dan was called into another closed-door session. When he came out, his shoulders were slumped, his badge clipped loosely to his pocket, like he didn't care if it fell. He didn't meet my eyes. My throat burned, but I didn't speak. Not yet. The morning of the review, the building felt different, quieter, as if the walls themselves were waiting. My boss strutted past me, tie perfectly knotted, smile rehearsed. Wish me luck, he said, winking. I wanted to laugh, because luck was the only thing left he could count on. By then, the clock in my head had hit 0. The beacons were set. The audit was waiting. The boardroom doors would open, and everything he thought was invisible would finally be in the light, and I would be there. The boardroom was colder than the rest of the building, all glass and chrome, the kind of place designed to make you feel small. I sat in the back row with a notebook open, pretending to be just another analyst observing. My boss took center stage like a man about to sell the future itself. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice smooth as butter, what you're about to see is proof that our pilot isn't just working, it's transforming our business. He clicked, and my charts appeared on the massive screen. He walked the room, pointing, smiling, basking in nods from the directors. For 10 minutes, he owned the room. Growth curves, churn rates, retention metrics, all the slides I'd built, all the words I'd written, parroted back as if they were his gospel. I scribbled in my notebook, but my hand didn't shake, because I knew what was coming. Then the CFO leaned forward, fingers steepled. Impressive numbers, she said, but let's do a live refresh. Show us the data pipeline in real time. The air shifted. My boss smiled too quickly. Of course. He clicked into his sandbox, tried to run the query. The screen blinked red. Access error. He cleared his throat. Tried again. Same result. Seems to be a permissions issue, he said, glancing around for backup. The metrics don't always replicate outside production. Then let's have production. The CFO's tone was firm. Can you run it now? My boss hesitated, sweat starting at his temple. It's, tricky without my analyst. His eyes darted to me finally. Could you, help run this? The room turned. Every director, every exec, all eyes on me. I stood, walked slowly to the console, logged in with my credentials. My boss hovered at my shoulder, whispering, "Just run the version I sent." I ignored him. I ran the clean query, straight from prod. The chart rebuilt itself on the screen, crisp and undeniable. The numbers were good, respectable, but nowhere near the surge he'd promised. Silence fell like a hammer. Then on the sidebar, the governance tool pinged automatically. A lineage panel opened, tracing the query's history, and there it was, the SQL view, with my watermark, my initials, my date, clear as day. The CFO tilted her head. Interesting. This doesn't match the export in your slide deck. Before he could answer, Ligal chimed in. We've also identified irregular activity in the usage logs. Traffic spiking at 2 a.m., clustered IPs, duplicate sessions. That doesn't qualify as organic adoption. She slid a folder across the table. Finance followed. The revenue projections you submitted don't reconcile with verified accounts. We found fabricated trial IDs, accounts that don't exist in billing. My boss's face drained of color. He stammered, tried to laugh it off. Clearly there's been miscommunication. A technical glitch, maybe. The CFO cut him off. Miscommunication doesn't generate fake accounts, and it doesn't explain why every one of your decks was built from someone else's queries. She glanced at me, then at Dan, who had been quietly invited to the session at the last minute. Perhaps you'd like to answer instead? Dan looked stunned, caught off guard, but when asked how the pipeline was designed, he answered clean, precise, without hesitation. His knowledge was undeniable. And then legal dropped the final stone. We also reviewed an audio file. Policy requires calls be recorded. In one segment, you describe your intent to massage data and remove certain staff. That corroborates the pattern we're seeing. My boss's jaw worked like he wanted to shout, but nothing came out. The board exchanged glances. The CFO spoke clearly. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties, pending HR and legal proceedings. The room was silent except for the sound of him packing his laptop into his bag. No applause, no outburst. Just the slow, humiliating shuffle of a man who thought he was untouchable, realizing he wasn't. As he walked out, Dan glanced at me, confusion and gratitude mingling in his eyes. He didn't know everything yet, but he knew enough. I sat back down, notebook still open, pulse finally steady. The clock in my head had stopped, and for the first time in weeks, I breathed. The boardroom emptied slowly, the way a theater does after a play that ended heavier than anyone expected. Directors whispered to each other, legal stacked folders, and the CFO lingered by the window, her reflection cutting through the skyline. My boss was gone, but the echo of his downfall still hung in the air. I stayed seated, notebook open, pretending to jot notes. Really, I was just breathing. In, out. For weeks, I'd lived with a knot in my chest, the constant tick of the 30-day clock. Now it was quiet. The CFO turned. You, she said, eyes on me. You ran the clean query, correct? Yes, I said, voice steady. Would you step into my office? Her office was warmer than the boardroom, sunlight cutting through blinds, a shelf lined with neat rows of finance books and awards. She gestured for me to sit. Dan was there too, shoulders still slumped, but his eyes held a flicker of hope. We've reviewed the material, she said. The integrity of the data came from your work. We'd like to offer you the role of director, effective immediately. My stomach tightened. The title, the money, the recognition. It was everything I'd been denied for months. But I thought about the late nights, the stolen words, the humiliation of being invisible. And I thought about Dan, shoved toward the door after decades of loyalty. So I said, thank you, but I want something else. The CFO raised an eyebrow. I'll accept a new position, I said, but not director. Head of integrity and impact. I want authority to build attribution safeguards, to protect authorship in our work. I want automatic audit trails and decks and dashboards. I want a budget line for compliance. And I want Michael, the intern on payroll, full-time. And Dan, he stays. Interim director, until he's ready to retire on his own terms. Silence stretched. Dan's mouth opened slightly, stunned. The CFO studied me like she was weighing metal in her hand. Then she nodded. Once. Done. Relief surge, sharp and clean. Not revenge. Justice. The weeks that followed were different. For the first time, our dashboards told the truth. Without spin. Live demos ran from production only. Watermarks made authorship visible by default. Michael, now a junior analyst, smiled like he'd won the lottery. And Dan? He moved slower these days, but when he spoke in meetings, people listened again. One afternoon, we sat in the break room together, just the two of us. He stirred his coffee, glanced at me. You didn't have to do that, he said. I did, I replied, because they thought I was invisible. He smiled, small but real. Not anymore. And that's the thing. My boss thought arrogance was power. He thought silence meant weakness. He thought invisibility meant I didn't exist. But arrogance makes you sloppy. Silence makes you dangerous. And invisibility? Sometimes it's the best cover in the world. So if you've ever been underestimated, if someone's written you off as useful, not dangerous, remember this. The same blindness that lets them dismiss you is the blindness that will undo them. And if you've ever caught a hot mic truth, if you've ever heard what you weren't meant to hear, tell me. Drop your story in the comments. Subscribe, share it with someone who's been overlooked. Because sometimes the sweetest karma doesn't come from shouting. It comes from listening.